Hello and welcome to another tutorial of CSS and HTML. In this tutorial, we are going to expand on the concepts that we started working on last time. A question comes to mind, can a tag has a combination of an ID as well as a class? The answer is yes. So we're now going to try to create an ID, and we're going to give that ID to the division that already has a class in place. So we're going to call this one an inner effect 2. And just to be a little different in the properties, I would like to change a property of text indent. Let's say 0.5 of an inch. Now I'm going to come down in this division. I'm going to write some text here. And now let's refresh this page. Right now, since I did not give the ID to the division, so just to look at the page, how it looks like before. All it does, it lists a list of programming languages, and it lists the 3 programming languages. Okay, so now I will going to come down in the division, and I'll say ID equals to inner effect 2. Now let's refresh this page. And you can see the entire division jumped. It was indented by half of an inch to the right. So yes, it can have a combination of an ID as well as a class. So if I would like to use a different property, I could also do that. For example, if I would like to do letter spacing of 10 pixels, now you can see the difference here as well. That the indentation was back to normal, but the letter spacing was expanded. Now, I can always override some of the properties that are inherent from the parent tag. For example, UL is inheriting properties from division, and LI is inheriting properties from its grandparent division. But if I say I want all my UL to have a letter spacing of 1 pixel, and especially if that UL is inside a division, just to have another level, another layer. And let's test this code the way it is at this point by going to the browser. And here you have noticed that the list itself doesn't have the spacing of 10 pixels, but the heading does. Now, one more thing that I would like to introduce over here, you can also rewrite this property as this. Now, how will this read now? It will read as if the UL is inside a tag which has used an inner effect 2 as its ID, only then the UL's letter spacing should be 1 pixels. Once again, if UL is a child of a tag which has used ID inner effect 2, only then give the letter spacing of 1 pixel. However, if there is a UL that is not a child of a tag which has introduced or used ID inner effect 2, then don't bother with the letter spacing. So that's another thing that you can do, is to have these kind of rules established right within your CSS document. Now let me put together here another division. And this time I would like to use OL instead of UL, and I'm going to play around with these just a little bit. Now technically speaking, I should not be using the same ID again, so that's why I'm getting rid of this. And let's call this list of markup languages. So we're going to call the first one hypertext. The second one we're going to call extensible. And the third one we're going to call standard generalized. So these are the 3 entries. And I'm going to change my UL to OLs, just so that you can see how the output looked like at this point. Here is the output. where I have 1, 2, 3. That's my second list. And this is my first list. And as you can clearly see, the letter spacing is not applied to this second division because we have not used the inner fact2 as an ID. Now using CSS, you can do so much. It's sort of kind of, as we have learned in some of our earlier tutorials, that all the properties are stacked or in layers. So the highest priority layer is the inline CSS. The next layer is embedded. The last layer is external. And the very last layer, even after external, is the default HTML tag properties that are controlled by the browser. So UL by default is supposed to give you a list style of bullets, which is unordered list. And by default, OL is supposed to give you a list of items in an ordered fashion. However, you can always change those default properties using CSS. And let's demonstrate and learn about that in this tutorial. So we will going to come up here and we will going to introduce the UL, and we'll say, okay, list style type. Anywhere you see a UL, change to list style type. By default, UL is supposed to give you unordered list, but if I say I would like to use upper Roman, so I could use values of lower Roman, upper Roman, lower alpha, upper alpha, and decimal leading 0. And as you have learned in the past, that whenever a value in CSS or a property in CSS comprises of more than one words, we always put hyphens. For example, if I'm talking about decimal leading 0, that's 3 words. That means decimal hyphen leading hyphen 0. So you never put any spaces, neither in the name of the property nor in its value. So now let's try to test it in the browser, and here you will be able to see that it was UL, but it has now been changed to 1, 2, 3. Pretty amazing that how you can control that. Now let's control the OL, and I can say, okay, list style type, and let's use square. And you will notice that OL, which is originally designed to display numbers, can now display bullets. So you can use the power of CSS to render your HTML however you want to render it. What we would like to learn next is how you can display an image as a bullet using CSS, which was not quite possible using HTML. So for that, we would have to look for a small image that we would like to use as a bullet, and then use that in the embedded CSS. So for that reason, I copied an image into my images folder, which I would like to use over here for my UL. Instead of list style type, I would rather use list style image with a value of URL. And remember, the word URL and the parentheses must be written together. Now I placed my image in the images folder, and the name is bullet.gif. We usually use GIF files for this purpose because they're smaller. They are perfect for this kind of activity. And now let me go to run and launch in Internet Explorer. And here you can see that all the programming languages now are using this bullet that has a letter C in it. So this is how you can be replacing a bullet with an image. And then there are other CSS properties that I would like to explore in the next tutorials. That's all for now from this tutorial. Catch you pretty soon.